Welcome to Conversations. My name is Jason Plotkin. I'm the Program Director at Congregation Emanu in Houston, Texas. And every Wednesday at 12 p.m. noon, we sit down with a member of the congregation, the community, or perhaps from the sports world to discuss current affairs. This week, we're really excited. It is 4th of July weekend, and you know Congregation Emanu does celebrate the 4th. And it's traditionally a heavy holiday travel weekend. I'm sure many of us are not going out of town that might have originally. And I thought it would be appropriate to learn what's going on in the travel agency. So we're lucky to have Dan Landson, who is actually an Emanu alum, but he is the Southwest Airlines Communications Lead, a spokesperson for Southwest Airlines. And we're happy to have Dan on. Dan, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks for being in my living room. It's great. No, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm excited. My dad actually recommended that I bring you on the show, and I usually don't give credit to my parents for anything, but we're happy to have you. It makes sense to talk to someone from the travel agency, and you're obviously someone I have a relationship with, so happy to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to your dad as well. He is a great man, and your parents are awesome, and definitely loved meeting them many years ago.
He'll appreciate that. So before we dive in, let's talk about your role at the company, just to set the stage, if you will.
Sure. So at Southwest, I'm on our communications team. So I'm on the external media relations group. So primarily my job is working with media around the country, anywhere Southwest serves or is considering serving. We are the spokespeople for the company, and we get the opportunity to act as reporters within the organization as well. So we're always looking for great, unique stories that we can tell out in the public. And, some of those stories are things as, we've had flight attendants that have gone viral for good reasons, telling jokes on board, and other things such as we've had the opportunity to work with a pilot who was able to fly his dad's remains home after being missing in action for over 50 years. So it's just a great opportunity to meet different people all across the organization, all across the country.
Now, before you got to Southwest, you got your start in television. Like myself, you're a proud Sam Houston State alum. I had to mention that, right?
Go Bearcats.
Go Bearcats from the Mass Communications Department. You always had a fascination with the airlines and airplanes. Tell us how you came in love with the airline industry and how you transitioned.
Sure. I'm going to take you on a little time travel journey, if you will. We're going to go back to 6th grade Dan. It was probably about the same size back then. And it was a Saturday afternoon, and my mom took me to tour a B-17 bomber at the Sugar Land Municipal Airport. And ever since stepping on that airplane, I knew I wanted to work for an airline. Of course, growing up in Houston, there were two airlines to choose from. There was Continental, and there was Southwest. And, my parents were very fortunate enough to be able to travel on both, and I loved both, but there was one that I really, really started to enjoy more as I got older, and that was Southwest. And so unfortunately, I didn't go straight to the airline industry. I did have a little deviation, if you will, and after going to Sam Houston, studying radio and television, I was a news producer for about 7 years in Las Vegas before making the career change to public relations. And I have to say, I've never looked back because it's just been an incredible journey over the last number of years.
All right. Well, let's talk about the airlines before the pandemic. And obviously, you have a lens from your role at Southwest, but I know, knowing you as someone who's very interested in the comings and goings, you have a nice general perspective. So 2019, very solid year for the airlines industry, domestically, internationally. At what point did the airline industry know it had to make changes and pivot prior to the pandemic really coming on strong here in the U.S.?
Yeah, excellent question. So, when you look at the airline industry as a whole, we are probably one of the most nimble organizations in the world. We have to quickly react to government or geopolitical issues. And even coming off of the 2008-2009 recession, there was a lot of financial changes that needed to be made quickly to enable success for long term. So going into this, we were strong. The airlines around the world were enjoying record profits, record load factors. 2019 was great. 2020 was on the road to be even better. Things were looking up, lots of great new destinations around the world. In fact, actually there was a problem. There were so many, there's so much demand around the world that there weren't enough airplanes to keep up with it. So that created some strain for some airlines having to pick and choose the routes that they wanted to choose. But then in early January, we started seeing some inclination that there was something going on in Asia. And typically what you see is business travel drop off first. Leisure will eventually fall. But what we saw was this, as the coronavirus started spreading across Asia and starting to show its teeth, if you will, in the United States, these large conventions started canceling. And as these conventions started canceling, it just pushed that boulder down a cliff. And the amount of cancellations outpaced new bookings for the first time in a number of years. So that just really, and that was across the board. In Asia, you had some airlines that were actually stopping, that were just being grounded. And that's unheard of in the industry. There's always been vital air service across the continents that you're serving. So right then and there, we knew something was wrong. And we knew we needed to quickly react to the situation at hand before we could catch our breath and figure out, okay, where are we? Let's regroup here. So right in the US, it really started to show at the end of February, early March. And by mid-March is when we were definitely heading down a path that we had never been down before. And then if we look ahead just slightly, in April, our load factor was 8%. And if you look at last year's load factor in April, so load factor is the amount of people that are actually on the seats that are available. So we had 8% of our seats were occupied. If we look back a year ago, that number was probably in the upper 80s, maybe even closer to 90% load factor. So dramatic difference, overnight change, and we just needed to quickly reset our operation. What we ended up doing is April, we weren't quite there yet. We knew what we needed to do, but unfortunately because the labor market in the airline industry is so complex that the flight crews are bidding for flights. And so there's a lot of processes that you have to work through in order to start removing flights from a schedule because you are impacting our crews, you are impacting scheduling. And if you ever have an interest in putting together a 5 million piece puzzle, you would be great at running an airline. There's so many complexities that involve everything from maintenance to capacity at airports to even getting passengers on board or moving passengers off a flight that's canceled. So we needed to work quickly to rebuild our network for the demand. So we were able to quickly lower the amount of flights that we were offering because, simply put, there was no demand. So it was, we spent a good part of the end of March, early April resetting. May, we were able to roll out that reset schedule. We were offering about 1,000 flights a day, maybe a little bit more. And on a normal day in May, where we would offer 4,100 flights. So dramatic difference overnight.
So you talked about all the puzzle pieces, right? What are some of the keys, whether it's Southwest or another airline, and you alluded to some of these in the last answer, but what are some of the major elements that kind of have to click just like that? First steps towards moving towards a changed look for what the airlines industry looks like, or a specific airlines, especially you brought up the Asian ones just shutting down completely.
Yeah, there were several weeks in March that we did not know if we were going to fly the next day, only for the fact of we didn't know if air travel was going to be shut down. We had international service. We've temporarily paused it based on some government regulations. We didn't know when we were going to be able to start flying again. States were beginning to put up travel bans. We didn't know if we were going to be able to fly to certain destinations because a travel ban. For example, New York had the first travel ban or travel restrictions. So what does that look like? What does that look like for our flight crews who have to overnight there? What does that look like for those flight crews? We need to make sure that there's food available. We need to make sure that they're safe going to and from the airport. There's all these things that the average person would never know existed, but we have to make sure that our people are safe, our customers are safe, and that we need to offer them the ability to get home safely as well. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. And, you know, when we were able to finally realize airspace is going to remain open, we needed to take the next step. What does that look like for the traveling public? We made a commitment that we were going to serve all of our destinations domestically. We did have to temporarily pause our international service, which July 1st, which is today, it will start coming online, and it will be a rolling function all the way through once we get the rest of the network up and running, looking early 2021 right now for all of our international destinations to be up and running. So there's all these different puzzle pieces that have to come into play. And then every couple days, you just have to stop, pause, take a deep breath, understand the surroundings, see where things are, and then build a schedule based on that. So for example, in New York, our flight attendants and pilots love a long overnight in New York because they get a chance to go into the city and experience the great food and the great entertainment offerings that the city offers. Well, because there was a travel restriction, we needed to pull out all the overnight trips because the hotels were closed. There was no restaurants available, no dining available. You know, and it just creates this process where you do that for every destination.
Right. And, you know, any corporation of Southwest size or any of the other airlines or truly any customer service agencies had to shuffle operations. You guys and the other airlines had to deal with a lot of cancellations instead of bookings, where there's things behind the scenes that and I'm a logistics guy, I've brought that up in previous conversations with what I deal with at Emanu and what I've dealt with in college sports. But what were some of the people shuffling things that you guys had to do to handle the change from the booking end to helping people navigate cancellations and other things?
You're right. You know, we have 60,000 employees across the United States. And so we had to take a look at every single operation, every single city that we operate. What are the work requirements? Can people work at home? For example, our call centers were in some states that were requiring work from home if available. Then we start looking at how do we enact that. You know, because we're an airline and we're vital to the nation, if you will. A lot of our folks were able to continue working, which was great. In Dallas, for example, where I am, our headquarters is located at left field. We actually closed the headquarters other than vital, essential personnel. So basically our dispatchers and anyone else that needed to be on campus. And we pushed everyone out back to work from home environments. So that's why normally this wouldn't be my background, but it is. So that you had all these things happening all at once. And it is impressive that we were able to do it with such speed, efficiency, and accuracy. A lot of cities, for example, we never had a work from home program for our customer service and support team, and those are reservations agents. And so we were able to quickly enact work from home policies for several of the cities that we do have call centers in. So things like that are innovation, are pivoting, as I mentioned. Things have to happen quick, and you got to make it happen to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, we all talk about pivoting. So let's talk about what's going on right now. I think I haven't been to an airport during the pandemic. I'm sure a lot of people haven't, based on what you're saying about the occupancy. But, what are airlines and airports doing right now to adjust the journey? And I'm talking, the second you walk in the airport here in Houston, obviously Hobby and Bush Intercontinental, to getting on the airplane. What's that look like?
Yeah, that's been a recent change that we've been able to work through. For us, for Southwest, your journey actually starts when you check in. So as you know, you check in on your phone 24 hours in advance, you get your boarding position. And while you're checking in, you're now having to read a health declaration to make sure that you weren't exposed to COVID-19. You're not experiencing any symptoms that may be related to COVID-19, and that you're gonna wear a face mask while traveling, which is what we now require of all of our travelers, all of our employees. So that's where your process actually begins. Then once you get to the airport, you'll notice there will be plexiglass shields for any positions where there's a high touch or high long conversations that would occur between a customer and an employee. And then, so there's like ticket counters and gate podiums. We're also cleaning all of our high touch items a lot more frequently than we had been in the past. So we want to make sure that it's a safe, clean environment for our employees and customers. And then as boarding begins, we've modified it temporarily to allow, instead of boarding in groups of 30, we're boarding in groups of 10. So once, and that all helps, space out the customers as they board. We're also limiting the amount of seats that we're selling on each flight. Us and another airline are essentially blocking the middle seat through the end of September. That means for Southwest, as you know, we have an open seating policy. We're actually capping the number of seats that are sold to about 2/3, so leaving enough to leave the middle seat open. But what that means for families who are traveling this summer, you'll be able to sit together, so we're not physically blocking the middle seat. And then before and after every single flight, we're disinfecting high-touch items, so seat belts, seats, overhead bins, and even the flight deck and lavatories. And then every 30 days, we're using electrostatic misters to spray a substance that sticks to the surface for 30 days that helps keep the virus from sticking on any surfaces. So we're doing a lot. Our airline industry trade group, Airlines for America, has been great at pushing forward some industry-wide situations. So the health declaration, all the major carriers are doing that now. Cleaning, every airline is doing that. Every airport is doing that. We have great airport partners out there that, it's not just the airlines who've been impacted by this financially. Airports have been dramatically impacted because as they depend on the passengers for their revenue. And so obviously when there are no passengers, they see a dramatic decline in revenue as well. So we're working together and trying to get the industry back on track, and we know we will. It's just a matter of we got to work through a couple of the different things here in the meantime.
So, the interesting thing is I think you take one step forward and then 2 steps back. Obviously in Texas, we've taken a step back to some degree. What are you guys doing to rebuild your network per se as different locales are coming back online? And obviously I presume Texas is a challenge and some of the other states who are having to pause their reopening, but what are some of the big challenges you're seeing from that?
Right. We want to be able to serve everywhere with the amount of flights that we had scheduled. We want to be able to connect our customers to what's important to them. Those are people, places. So what we actually have done is we've re-envisioned the network, as you will. A lot of our service was business-oriented, conventions and that sort of thing, which is traditional. We're in summer, which is great for summer travel. However, some of the key cities are not a big draw at the moment. Chicago, New York, California cities. So we've been able to actually modify the service for those cities, but we're also seeing increasing numbers of travelers going to places that have reopened. Las Vegas, Arizona, Florida. Even though the current situation may not be the best for everyone traveling, we know that a lot of people have vacation homes in Florida. They just want to get away for a couple days. So we are seeing a pretty big increase of travelers to Florida. So we've been able to add in routes that our customers are looking for and get them to places that they want to go. So we kind of had to go back to square one again and look where the demand is, look where people are buying tickets, and then adding that service back in.
So say I'm a traveler right now, and we'll move to the future after this, but say I'm a traveler right now who need to travel to XYZ destination around the country. Is there some advice that the airlines would give to me as I prepare? Am I doing more ahead of time to get ready for the trip versus not?
Yeah, actually. So first and foremost, I hope you book on Southwest. I would greatly appreciate it. We have a great profit sharing program, so any little bit helps. At Southwest, we really treat our customers as if they're our family. We're not going to put a customer on a plane that we wouldn't put our own family on board. So I firmly believe that we are safe. We want to create a warm and welcoming environment. And we want people to know that when they're ready to travel, we're going to be here for you. And we're going to get you to the place that you need to go. Couple of things, though, that you should know. Food and beverage service might be limited in the airports that you're at. And also on board, we're serving some snacks on flights that are over 250 miles, but you might want to pack your own snacks and bring your own drinks, non-alcoholic, of course. While you're traveling, while you're at an airport, we require you to wear your mask. There are a lot of mask ordinances in place as it is for a lot of the cities that we do travel to. And once you're on board, sit back, relax, enjoy our in-flight entertainment options on your own device. And we're going to get you there. We're going to get you there safely, and we're going to get you there as on time as possible. And we want you to enjoy your vacation or whatever, for whatever reason you're traveling, we want you to arrive safely.
All right. Now we're going to close with 3 or so questions looking ahead. We're in hurricane season. This is Houston, Texas. Dallas isn't too far off, and a lot of your major entry points into the Southwest network are really in Hurricane Alley, if you will. So it's a big deal, hurricanes, and it completely changes your network. How do you guys typically prepare for hurricane season, and has the pandemic changed that preparation significantly for you guys and anyone else that comes through this area?
Yeah, at an airline of our size, and very much the same situation in Houston with the large oil and gas companies, they're doing the exact same thing. They have a playbook. They have a crisis management team, and we will work together through them to make sure that everyone's got their plans in place. The good news about hurricane season is it comes every year, and we train every year for it. Pandemic, obviously, let's hope we don't see another one for 100 years or more. So that one's a little bit harder to get used to, and not one that is actively available in your crisis management plan. But from a hurricane standpoint, we actually start training a couple months into the year. So early spring, we start going through the plan and making sure that the cities that may or may not be in the hurricane related area have the tools available to them. So there's a different checklists that they have to go through, things such as making sure that they've got enough batteries just in case they have to use flashlights if power goes out. Make sure they have special phones on hand just in case the cellular systems go down. And we've seen that. And so that's why we have these tools available for all of our teams. Just like you and I at our homes, we have our own plans to go through, and we do that across the system to make sure. And every city's got their own variants, if you will. So in Houston, we want to make sure that we've got enough. We need to know everyone's contact information. Things that even as you're building your hurricane plan, contact information is great. Make sure that if you're packing a go bag, make sure you keep a couple of pills for your medications on hand. Make sure you have backups of keys and anything you might need to grab in a situation where you need to get out. make sure you have that and ready to go so that you're not stuck wondering, do you have enough medication? Do you have your sunscreen? Do you have all the things that you need in an emergency?
So a lot of our guests, I've asked what exactly is going to stick. 9/11 obviously saw a lot of changes to security, which as we as a synagogue can attest to, but it's also reflected at sporting events and theater and, of course, the airports and going on an airplane. Are there changes that you think that are going on right now are going to hold? Or changes we may see possibly? What do you envision coming out of this pandemic that's going to stick?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's always hard to say. When you're in the moment, it's hard to see what the future is going to hold. I can tell you, though, I'm sure there's going to be a much, much higher emphasis on cleaning, to the likes that we've never seen before. And that's probably not a bad idea. We want to make sure that we're, even in our own homes, we want to make sure that we're clean and safe and sanitized, and that we're not bringing in viruses or other contaminants into our household. We want to do that on board the aircraft. So I think that might stick around, maybe some modification here or there. But it's hard to say. I think, personally speaking, I think people are going to be wearing their masks much more freely than they were before. You look at Asian countries, for example. People there were wearing masks before this was happening, but that's all, the air quality in a lot of the major cities are bad. So that's not a big change for them. We're lucky here in the United States that most of our air quality is pretty good, so we don't have to wear a mask. But I think that's going to last a little bit longer. And I think you're just going to see people being a lot more careful in what they do and how they interact with people. And hopefully we'll start seeing gatherings again, and we'll be safe enough to do it. And of course, from an airline perspective, we want to be able to travel and get folks to where they want to go. But at the same time, we recognize that we need to be safe. We need to be able to operate safely and in an environment that customers feel comfortable traveling in.
Right. And I'm going to end with, I like to end with a takeaway. So I'm going to kind of combine two thoughts. So this is for everyone who wants to travel again. So looking ahead, right, what kind of travel does the airline industry envisioning returning to whatever we want to perceive as normal first? And then on top of that, international travel. My family, we've been to Mexico multiple times. What does international travel look like in the new normal? I mean, is that going to be coming on pretty quickly? Or, I mean, in light of that being a different environment, is that going to take a while to get back to normal?
Sure. So looking in the near future, which is always an odd way of saying it, but the short term, if you will, we'll see leisure travel come back. We're already starting to see an uptick in leisure destinations. Businesses are not ready to travel yet. I think the corporations that have the road warriors, they're really examining what their travel policies are looking like right now. Frankly, with the technology available today, I think it's going to take longer to get business travelers moving again, because they can do the same amount of work by sitting at home. And obviously that's there's costs that are associated with traveling. And so if you're sitting at home, you don't have to pay those costs. And then we'll eventually see business travel come back. It's just a question of when. I wish we had a crystal ball and could see into the future. Now, on the leisure side for and business travel for international, I think that's going to be very, very limited for the next year or two. It always takes longer for business travel to come back, and business travel is an airline's bread and butter. So we're really hoping that we can get people moving again. But frankly, a lot of people say they're not going to travel until there's a vaccine, and that's understandable. Now, from you traveling with your family, for us, Mexico actually opens today on July 1. So feel free to book a ticket to Cancun. The destinations are open. Again, on Southwest, please. But you'll start seeing the Caribbean destinations and the vacation destinations really open up a lot more quickly than what you would think overseas. International, long haul international is what we would call it for Europe or Asia. I think we're probably a good year away from having the ability to freely travel there without any major restrictions. You're seeing some of that start percolating right now. The EU is looking at reopening their countries, and I know there's some restrictions that they're thinking about. And we'll work through those together. Of course, for Southwest, we don't travel to Europe or Asia, but we do have customers that do travel there. And so, we're here, we're working on it, and we'll get through it.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks for coming on our broadcast today. Please note for those who are watching us, things are changing rapidly, that this was recorded on June 29th, but Dan was an expert. He kept referencing July 1, so that's much appreciated because that's when this thing's going to air. Again, so there might be changes as relates to the airline industry. Some quick promos real quickly. July 4th, Congregation Emanu will still be doing its July 4th event, albeit on Zoom. There will be no fireworks from the garage, but Cantor Simmons and Barbara Loser have an exciting evening planned. Be on the lookout for that on our website and our weekly email and on our Facebook page. You do have to register ahead of time to get the Zoom information because we really want to see your faces. And of course, next week, Conversations continues at 12 p.m. Wednesday on Facebook and on our Emmanuel website, the Polar Chapel streaming. We'll be announcing our guests soon. Some exciting things in the coming weeks as it relates to guests, really hitting on some of the topics that you, our loyal listeners, like my father who suggested Dan for this episode, have been bringing up, and we really want to respond to the present state of being and some of the great suggestions. So thank you again, Dan, for joining us. We will see everybody next Wednesday at 12 p.m. on Conversations. This is Jason Plotkin signing off, and have a great day.